in the room.
That's exactly right. I work with Jamie Atkins.
Felix, may I start this? Just
Absolutely.
don't have to start the meeting, but we'll clip it off.
We're just using outdoor voices.
She's got a PM to try to work that.
Yes, although these help project is what
Yeah, I think we should-
Bryce was saying.
Okay, so I guess we can do a test. Can they hear us yet online?
Those are free.
They should actually
It's like,
we're muted.
I put candy bars, so. if you come in
Full
there-
size candy bars?
Full size.
That was impressive.
Yeah,
You can do a check now.
I do that.
Great. So I'm just gonna do a check
Instead of just-
using a fairly normal voice. Can you guys hear me online?
I've been doing that.
That's good.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Go big or go home this time.
I'm hearing a little bit of echo of myself in the room, but that's okay. Thank you.
Very excited to
Did you realize that those maps which I'm going to reference, they're not going to be able to see it.
So we have a few folks that are online. Can we email this to the clerk so she can get it to the folks online?
Okay.
Thanks.
And
You want me to take a picture of that, Adam, and send it to the clerk?
yeah, that'd probably be best because they're not going to be able to see it.
Jennifer Miniclaus.
Thanks, man.
Sorry, I can't see the participants list. How many members do we have?
Yep.
on? Thanks.
I will pull up the participant list right here.
Like we have 3.
I don't know. Felix, who she said, would he send it to the clerk to distribute?
Yes,
The
please.
clerk, yeah, Barbara.
Is that this?
I would send it to Jennifer.
Oh, Jennifer. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Jennifer, and then she can send it out.
Is that this or something?
Yes, this and then pictures of that.
So Jennifer, what's your last name?
Beniclausent. It's with you
Got
guys a picture.
I just sent it, Jennifer. Let me know if you got it. Thank you. I'll leave.
All right, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. The recording is on. Clerk, thank you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call to order this work session on AR 2022-72, appropriation to be used for design and manufacture for an adult shelter and or navigation center. Let's go ahead and start with the roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Mr. Constant? Ms. Allard?
I believe Ms. Allard is online. Maybe she can't unmute herself at this time.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy? Mr. Presberdia? Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson? Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Zolotow?
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And I do want to know, I did get a text that Ms. Allard is in attendance. Okay, so I'm going to walk through our time today. I believe we're noticed until 3:30, so we have a little bit of time to go through all of this. So we're going to start with the 30,000-foot view with an implementation update by Mr. Weddleton. So he's going to walk us through the last implementation status update, which was sent to all of the assembly and was posted online at the assembly's Committee on Housing and Homelessness website. This is the update from March 12th, 2022. And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to the administration for their presentation. Then after that, we will hear from 2 community councils, 1 representative from each of the 2 councils most impacted by the Navigation Center. And then we'll open it up to any further discussion after that. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Weddleton.
All right, thanks. So after the meetings of our group, Belinda and Tom put together a status update so people can kind of keep track of where we are and where we're going. So you should have that in front of you. If not, hang on. So we have a number of components to this project, and one is complex care for people, and I'll go through real briefly here, then a little more detail. And we are closing on the Sockeye Inn soon to provide that. Then there's permanent supportive housing and workforce housing. And we were looking at the Barrett Inn for that. That may not work out so well, might move on. And then a navigation center, kind of a low barrier shelter with navigation, which we will get in great detail later today. Special population shelter, we're thinking elders, LGBTQ. We have not made huge progress with that, but it's still on the list. It's something we will do. And then substance abuse treatment, and that is, at this point, we're looking at the old Salvation Army facility that is on 48 that was decommissioned after the earthquake, and we can get it back on sensibly, and that was a pretty good program, so we want to do that. Timeline is somewhat hopeful. We'd like to be out in the Sullivan Arena and by the end of June. It's good to be hopeful. Don't buy any tickets for hockey there quite yet, but you got to have a goal. Where's the money coming from? Well, we have a number of pockets. We're using CARES Act funds from the city, and we have lots of help from philanthropy, Rasmussen, Chugach, Alaska, Chalista, I think Doyon's in, Widener Apartment, Providence, I think Primero. We had groups that pitched in, committed 40 million about 3 or 4 years ago. So that money is coming, some of that money, maybe all, will come. And we recently did 6 million for capital investments in complex need shelters, Sockeye. The permanent supportive housing, we have it allocated there but not spent. And we have money towards this single adult shelter and navigation center, some of which we will be dealing with tomorrow, that 800,000 on our agenda. The little more detailed complex care shelter, the Sockeye Inn, and that is something that should be closing on by the end of the month. And with Catholic Social Services committed to operate it, so that's really good news. And that is for people we have people in the Sullivan Arena, Brother Francis, and some of the hotels who are, I think some are going through chemotherapy and things like that, and they're just wheelchairs and such, and it's just unimaginable really that they are in that kind of setting at the Sullivan. So this is a better place. They'll be helped better and more efficiently, and hopefully just life better for everyone. And that is sort of in play. Long-term is still being developed. Permanent supportive housing and workforce housing. There are people in all of the facilities who have jobs but just can't afford an apartment because it's crazy expensive living here. And this is some facilities for them to go in, get more stable in their employment and maybe better employment, and then hopefully move up and out into independent life. We were looking at the Barrett Inn, which seemed really good out the gate, but there's a lot of work to be done on that, maybe more than we can stomach. So there's a continuous look for another place. Another component of this is single adult navigation, which is what we will be talking in great detail here. So I will move on from that. Special populations, elderly women, LGBTQ+, and that has not been identified, but we will not forget about them. And then the substance abuse and housing, and Salvation Army is working. We have put money towards design to bring that back online. And that's, I think, continuing. It's pretty far along on that for Bob Dole or someone. Is that right? And there is money for that held up at the state, which is slowly moving that along, we believe. Current mass care at I guess this is at Sullivan and the hotels. I guess we're always looking, and we're moving some people in the Sockeye now, but we're always looking to keep that moving. Other system enhancements. There's a lot going on. The Salvation Army is doing stuff independent of this process. Most of what is going on in the homelessness is not what we're doing here. Salvation Army's dove in very deep and is doing a lot. I think Hope Center is expanding. Beans Cafe is looking to do more. So all the traditional shelter operators seem to be doing more. And as we get away from the pandemic, they should up their capacity, hopefully to where they were before, which will bring a lot of the people out of any system we would set up and go back to, places that were functioning fairly well, just didn't have the capacity to solve the problem. So there's a lot going on beyond what we're doing as a municipal contribution. That is the highlights. We should talk about navigation.
Great, thank you, Mr. Weddleton. And for walking us through that 30,000-foot view. I felt it was important for us to get started with that. And for folks who attend the Assembly's Committee on Housing and Homelessness, you'll probably hear something very similar on Wednesday, because we always do a regular update on the facilitated process. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to the administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we wanted to do for the Assembly members, and thank you for scheduling this work session, because I think it will be very helpful. Just as a bit of background and a bit of a history, myself and other members of the administration and 3 members from the Assembly since August have been engaged in this process. I think that we've made significant progress over that period of time. And as the Assembly members will recall that back a couple months ago, that you all approved a philosophical, policy-driven plan as to how collectively between the administration and the Assembly that we would address the bigger issue. And we were appreciative that that plan, as you will recall, was approved 11-0, and was, I think, a first major step forward in our community that has never, ever happened before. So our hats are off to you working with the administration to develop that plan. And as Mr. Weddleton knows, collectively, probably since August, 9 months ago, we probably have invested, 1,400, 1,500 hours, but it's been a long and very detailed and very arduous process. As a piece of that, as you will recall, then subsequent to that action, the administration and through the facilitation group appropriated from the municipality $6 million, and that went to the community foundation. There was 2 components to that, actually was in support of the 4 pillars of the plan that we have mutually agreed to. One of those appropriations was $2.8 million that went into the foundation for the navigation center. And that, as you will recall, was broken into 2 pieces. There was $2 million for facility as a first step, and there was $800,000 that went into that appropriation for design. After that action, the foundation wrote the municipality a check back in the amount of $800,000, so that we could commence with that piece of the pillar, that foundation, that $800,000 design. And so a few weeks ago, the administration briefed the facilitation group as to where we were in the process for site selection. First, we had to agree to site selection. We said generically that it would be in the Tudor Elmore area. The facilitation group, we discussed a number of different sites and where would it be best to meet our pillar plan objectives, and where would it fit best. And so I think, Mr. Chairman, what we'd like to do first is to walk the public and the other Assembly members through the process like we did with the facilitation group, so that you can everyone can see how we reached the recommendation for design, not for construction, but for design today. And so I'm going to turn that over to Adam Trombley because the members of the facilitation group thought he articulated it very well. And I think it will help answer a lot of questions that we've heard. And we've heard them at the facilitation group. We've heard them from assembly members that have not been part of the process. And so that we'll start with that and give a brief overview of what was considered, why it was considered, and hopefully answer some of those questions. Okay.
Okay, so before we turn it over to Mr. Trombley, just two things. One is for folks who are online who would like to get in the queue, I think probably the best way to do that is just to text me rather than put yourself in the queue on the chat, because I don't see that. And then second is I just want to note for the record that Meg Zolotel is in the room, but she is only here in her role as the interim executive director of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness and not as an assembly member. Go ahead, Mr. Trombley.
Joe, did you send them one or two pictures?
2 pictures, sir.
All right, and they should have those pictures. So what I'm gonna, for those on the phone, I'm gonna do this the best I can. Referencing the first map is gonna be the one where you're gonna see the bus barn with 2 big green X's over it. You'll see one just to the right of that says evidence. And it's got a lot more drawings on it than the other one. So I'll reference the other one later. But by the time this got to me, we were really looking at 3 individual sites. And I'll start with the current evidence lot, which is outlined in a dark blue where you'll see all those cars all the way to the left. So as we analyze this location, we said, okay, what is it going to take to build a facility at that spot? Well, the first thing you have to do, nothing can be built until you move the vehicles. In order to move the vehicles, we said, okay, where are we going to put those vehicles? Because they're evidence, they're APD evidence in criminal cases. So they have to be treated a very particular way. This current site is fenced, it's got security, cameras, all that kind of stuff. So any additional site that we go to is going to have that same level of security that APD, the chief is going to feel comfortable with. So what we identified is if you're looking at the map on the very far right, it's outlined in a lighter bluish green. It says evidence. We said, well, what if we take those vehicles and we put them on this lot here and we'll call it evidence? What we identified there is that currently this is zoned, I believe, B3 with B3 SL. So it has special limitations. Some of those special limitations are you have to build 193 units for housing. You have to have connectivity for bicycle, pedestrian traffic, those kind of things. And, you know, as we analyze this spot for moving it here, we said, you know, the assembly worked real hard. The Midtown Assembly members, they want this area developed, and they worked real hard to get that zoning designation there. So in order to remove that, we'd have to go back to P&Z, which can take 6 to 8 months, and then ultimately back to the assembly in order to remove those special limitations. We thought, well, that's a fairly cumbersome process that challenges our timeline. On top of that, we'd have to spend roughly about $4 million to upgrade this site because the chief says, hey, this has to be paved. This is currently not paved. So we'd have to pave it, we'd have to fence it, we'd have to camera it, put the security cameras, and we're looking at about a $4 million cost just in getting that site ready, not to include the stormwater drainage that would have to be improved. As the chief talked to us about this site to further complicate this location, is he says there are 2 separate costs. You could do it for roughly $2 million and change, or you could do it for roughly $4 million. The $2 to $3 million was that if we shrunk a lot and we said we're only going to use 3 acres, the more expensive one was 5 acres. It kind of determined that the 5-acre parcel was better, but in order to do that, you'll see just to the, if you're looking at the picture, just below that, you'll see that paved area. And in order to increase this currently outlined area, you'd have to replat it. So now you're going to the platting board, which is probably maybe a 4 to 6 month process. So that adds additional challenges. On top of that, in order to move that and create an evidence lot, you'd have to get a conditional use permit, which is gonna run you about $40,000 to $50,000. So there was a lot of challenges and timeframes in order to meet our June 30th, correct, Larry?
Yes.
Our June 30th timeframe of getting folks out, getting them taken care of getting this location, moving the vehicles here. And putting the navigation center where the current evidence lot is. So then what we decided was, well, what if, so I'm gonna go just to the right of the dark outline blue where the current evidence lot is, and you'll see a C there. It's outlined in a darker bluish green. We said, okay, what if we put it right here? What are the challenges associated with putting it right here? And what are the benefits to putting it right here? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that we don't have to move the evidence lot. If we don't have to move the evidence lot, we save about $50,000 in conditional use permit. We save 6 to 8 months in a 6 to 8 months in a conditional use permit, $50,000, and a $4 million cost because you don't have to move the evidence lot. The challenges associated with putting it right next to the evidence lot are this area just above it. These are all wetlands, Class C wetlands. And I'm going to get into the wetlands issue. So the challenge is that these are wetlands, and how do we mitigate that? There is a APD fuel pump, which is it's hard for me to describe where it's at, but code requires us to be, we can't be closer than 50 feet from that. So the structure has to be over and fit in that spot somewhere. But we still need a conditional use permit, which is going to cost you $50,000. But the nice thing that we can shorten the time frame when we looked at this, as far as doing the conditional use permit, is we can do a temporary structure, which allows you to build your structure in combination or in parallel with getting your conditional use permit. So it cuts down on that timeline. But again, we only have to do one instead of two. So that was a benefit to doing that there. This area here is PLI. PLI has you can put transient homeless shelters. It's a conditional use permit there. You don't have to do any sort of rezoning, so that was really good. Some of the downsides and some of the things to consider is that in this area, PLI has a 45-foot height limit. So that's gonna create some restriction on your structure. I don't know what, that was not my role, but just to provide that information. Some of the other things to think about is that as we put a structure on here and how it was gonna fit on this location, you're looking at access to it, how much wetlands are you gonna disturb? The more area that you disturb, that you identify that you're gonna disturb, you have to go to the Corps and you have to identify that with them. But all in all, what we discovered was that without having to move the evidence lot and keeping it here, we found this to be the best, most efficient, cost-effective way to get a navigation center in place by the time that the Sullivan Arena is gonna close. That's what we found with how we can do things. In regards to the wetlands, I think this is really important because the last time I met with you guys, I didn't have this information, but I have it now. So I wanted to update everybody. This is perfect. So, as I said, these are Class C wetlands. The good news is that this entire site, from the evidence lot all the way over to the APD area, this is, again, difficult to explain for you folks on the phone, but this entire area here has already been permitted by the Corps for development. This area right in here, this little jet, how it jets in, for you folks on the phone, you'll see the APD the previous headquarters. If you go in, you'll see this strip of pavement, how it kind of jets in a little bit. The reason they did that is because those were wetlands. But we have identified, we already have credits for these. It's permitted by the Corps and we have the credits. However, although it's permitted by the Corps and we have the credits, it doesn't mean that you can start building right away because it's permitted under a different use. You'd have to go back to the Corps, which we've already done 3 or 4 times because based on other projects, we'd have to go back to the Corps and say, I know it was permitted for use A, but now we're going to do use B. Well, use B is different from use A, so the Corps may look at that and say, you need to purchase more credits. And we just don't know that yet. we'd have to go to the Corps and ask them. So that may have provided an additional cost, it may not. But the good news is that one way to look at it is that we have a credit for credits, right? If we have to purchase more, we've already purchased them. But we just don't know yet until we go to the Corps and tell them what we're doing with how much we'd have to build or to purchase. The timeline for getting that change of use. It's the Corps. It's kind of a crapshoot, to be completely honest with you at times. In our estimation, it wouldn't necessarily have to go back out to public comment. If it doesn't have to go out to public comment, then it's about a 4-month process to get your change of use authorization. If it goes out for public comment, you're looking at 6 months plus. Both would kick you past the June 30th timeline, the goal which everybody, my understanding which has been set. So either option, you have that challenge. I do want to say that this lot, and you can kind of see the lot line, the building between MLK, the intersection of MLK and Elmore, you'll see that building right there at the corner on the left side. That is not part of this lot. The lot jets in and goes over by the navigation center and squares over. Is roughly 1.1 million square feet. In PLI, your maximum lot coverage is 45%, even with, and I'm not saying that the structure is 65,000, but I understand as part of the RFP there were mentions to that. Up to, even if you went up to 65,000 square feet, you still don't hit your 45% lot coverage. But you are limited again to your 45 foot height. So again, putting the navigation center there was kind of a no-brainer from a cost and a time perspective. We do have water and sewer running in the area. We would have to come off of a different line. Because this is a public safety facility, the old APD headquarters, you're not allowed to tap into their existing water and sewer mains. So you have to bring water and sewer off from a different location. But you'll see the pink line. The pink line, those are main water lines. So there isn't, the water access isn't very far in order to get it to that location. I think that's it for that map. So again, looking at all of those things, we're trying to get down to that June 30th timeframe. So what was further discussed and identified was, well, what if we just don't disturb the wetlands? And you'll see at the other map that you folks have on the phone where it just has a square with a B on it. We said, what if we just put the navigation center on the existing pavement right where it's at? And we said, and it looks like it'll fit. Well, I don't want to make that, but it will fit. It'll meet the needs of what was discussed at the, I'm sorry, what was it? The facilitation group. And the smaller footprint, the other thing I forgot to mention, as we talk about all these locations, there's other things to think about. There's parking requirements, there's snow storage. The larger the facility, the way the code reads is that for every 300 square feet of administrative space, you need one parking spot. For every 20 pillows or 20 beds, however you want to look at it, that's additional parking spot. That helps you understand your parking requirements. And then whatever your parking requirements are, 5% has to be set aside for snow storage. So that kind of increases your footprint as well. But we've identified the ability to commingle parking between the current APD building with their parking needs, with the parking needs of this facility. So the smaller the facility, the smaller the parking requirement, the larger the parking requirement. The reason B is so good is because there's no need to disturb wetlands. You don't have to go back to the Corps. It'll fit right on that site. I think that's it, Larry.
So the questions, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So we're going to go ahead and go on to questions. Hopefully folks online were able to follow that definitely in the room, there was a lot of fingers on the map and pointing. So I think we got a good demonstration in the room. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. First, we received a Word doc via email just a little while ago from Ms. Alger. We also got those 2 images, obviously. Are those going to be, or can those be posted for the public on the work session website? Because I don't believe they're there now.
We just got those documents at the beginning of the work session. So after the work session, we will make sure those are up.
Okay, good. So 2 more questions. One, and I was looking for it right now and I can't find it, but in the RFP, we already have some design documents that have come back, right, that show, and they weren't sent out for this work session. And I was looking on our website trying to find them. So I guess my questions are, 1, can we get those added as well so people see the work that's already been done for design? And 2, was that designed for the prior footprint or for this new footprint?
The answer to that question, Member Dunbar, is that was for the current proposed footprint. So but that was also a very rough layout, because until we get into the design of the process, but that facility that Mr. Trombley laid out is up to 29,000 square feet. Once the design is complete and we engage the architects and designers, whatnot, it may be 25,000, maybe 24,000, because we have to balance that, as Adam pointed out, against parking requirements, snow removal. It's laid out in the plan. You'll see the parking spots on the plan, but the design is now at the beginning of the process.
Okay.
And that,
So
that
I
29.
would reiterate that I hope we can add that document to the website as well, so the public can easily find it and see it. And then my question is, so 29,000 square feet that is in that design, that's for 200 beds plus 130 beds surge capacity.
That is correct. I started to mention that, then I got a question answered. That is absolutely the case.
And so if we shrink it down to 23,000 feet, is the intent to still keep it at 200 beds plus 130 bed surge capacity?
Well, Mr. Dunbar, through the chair, that will not be necessary, because, as was pointed out originally, that if there's excess square footage, there's a need for food storage for an emergency. So any additional square footage that would be reprogrammed for that. But it appears that once the design professionals get engaged in it, that the facility will be about 29,000 square feet.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood. So I thought you said that the new footprint, you're going to shrink it down to 23 or 24,000 square feet.
I said that I don't know what the precise number is going to be. We've seen different plans, different ideas, and until we get the design professionals, right now it appears, as of today, it appears that square footage is about 29,000 square feet. But as all the points that Adam laid out have to be taken into consideration before you can identify a specific square footage.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Right, I don't see any other questions. Turn it back to you.
Actually, if I could just.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Robinson.
You know, I just thought, so maybe to Adam, so we we started out, it's been 9 months ago, you know, 1,000 person shelter, and we were talking 42 structures, like each 40, so up to
85, 90,000 square feet, yes.
So now we've got a much smaller footprint, to maybe 29,000 square feet. So, and I think we saw a sketch probably would fit here, looking at Adam for the rest of the world. So were there a desire to expand it? I think you described we'd have to go another conditional use, more wetlands. There would be a significant public process, right? Could it be expanded without public process?
Well, I think once you get your conditional use, I think it depends on how you write your conditional use. Because if you just limit your conditional use to the current structure, then I would say you have to go back and amend your conditional use. But you could do a conditional use that would allow for expansion. But if you allowed for expansion, you'd still have to take into account the wetlands process. I would never recommend expanding this type of structure without a public process. I think that it's always probably the healthiest way to do it, because this is the people's project ultimately. But I just don't know from the core standpoint whether or not they would put, as we would go through the change of use with the core on the current permit for the wetlands, whether or not they would put that out to public comment. That's the discretion of them. We don't think that they will, but we're just saying that it's a possibility, so that, and I just let you guys know that so no one's surprised.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
And just for the record, that was Mr. Trombley. Go ahead.
The second major question, Mr. Chairman, that came to our attention, in order to achieve the June 30th deadline, is the process that was used to get to the design. Like the purchasing agent we put it in writing, but maybe just so that people can ask questions and any clarification. This is not a new process. There's a question about, was this a new process? The answer to that question is no. It's been done before. The Assembly actually approved the resolution to set this up in 2020. So that being said, I think that we heard some of the questions, so we tried to develop a document so that everybody could see, in the interest of full disclosure. Again, everything under consideration is we're focusing on June 30th. How do we get to June 30th so that we can deal with the closing of the Sullivan Arena and putting it back into public use? So Rochelle, if you would please kind of walk everyone through. And this is new, and this is kind of new information, Mr. Chairman, that we didn't get to in the facilitation group last week. But we listened from the administration side and said, okay, people are asking these questions. Well, then we need to provide answers to them. So this is an effort. I know the facilitation group meets again on Wednesday, and so it might be old information for you by that time because we've already gone through this process. But so this is another step as we've taken it all throughout the process to be open and transparent once the facilitation group is gone through the process. So, Michelle?
Thank you, Larry. Through the chair. Early on, we were notified that we needed to build a navigation center. With the help of Mr. Saxon Shear to my right, we came together and discussed what would be the most efficient and the most cost efficient and to meet the June 30th deadline. We quickly realized it would be in our best interest to hire a consultant by the name of MCG, who we already had as a term contractor. MCG has a wealth of experience in both building and in the CMGC process. After meeting
with the CMG.
I will. After meeting with MCG, we agreed, Saxton and I, that was in fact the best process to go through. And what the CMGC process is, it's and I'll just read from the handout I gave you, it'll be the easiest. The CMGC Construction Manager General Contractor is a product delivery method which accelerates the design and the construction process, ultimately shortening the project's timeline and reducing costs. Having a contractor on the team early in the process places them in an advisory role, giving real-time information on material procurement and time schedule. Given the fact that we did want to hit that June 30th deadline, or timeline, I should say, this was the best approach. They then assisted us with developing an RFP in which we put forth a concept for a design, allowing bidders to have some sort of foundation or basis for what the end result may be. Again, I stress the word concept because we allowed the bidders to come forward with ideas. which we are now in that phase. I think that's it as far as the CMGC process.
Saxon?
And through the chair, this is Saxon Shear, Director of Maintenance Operations. Rochelle and I have worked closely through this process to really identify the fastest delivery method, and really came down to design, build, or CMGC. And so, having the benefit of the term contractors that we have, the municipality has had and retained, really allowed us to help accelerate a solution for this problem. And so it's been a great approach. And going back to what Rochelle was saying, that the design and the way that we've structured this project is the basis of design and subject to change to the CMGC process. And through our negotiations, we're able to kind of tailor the project. Now we have all the data that has trickled down from the work groups that identify occupancy and the other needs for the structure. Now it's very 30,000 foot view, as we've talked about. And so we are drawing from the industry's best. And by putting out this RFP, we identified the confines of our project for the industry to provide a solution to our problem. And so essentially that's what we have in the proposals that we've received. Now we're just fine tuning it. And going back to what Mr. Dunbar was asking in trying to nail down the square footage, that really comes down to the confines and the constraints of the lot that we have newly identified. So it is all coming down to meet the immediate need of this group, so.
Mr. Weddleton?
Thanks. So a couple, so we're looking at this under term contract here. And so one RSA Engineering, it says 20,000 square feet, that they were designed for 20,000 square feet. So a little bit, did they come up with we needed 29 to do the job, or why is that out of sync?
Mr. Beck. So initially, we gave them the confines of what we were looking at. And we only gave them an occupancy. So from the work group, we heard 200 occupants with the surge of 130. And so the designers have, for the code and everything, they have a formula for occupant to square foot need. And so some of those, they didn't have the programming, they didn't have all the educational needs or the navigational needs that we have yet to program into this. And so that was just a very preliminary design basis.
Okay, so another question, I think, so we have these are set up as term contractors, right? So we can call on them as needed, kind of not to exceed kind of things. So we have tomorrow $800,000 to go to this, which is money we put with the community foundation. Now they're sending it back for us to use on this. So and this, I assume, is being pulled from that 800,000, right? 10 to 2, okay. And then, so this is quarter, 250,000. That's out of my head there. So there's quite a bit left. So what's the rest going to? I just want to prep for discussion for tomorrow.
Well, Mr. Chairman, John, when we pulled the original appropriation of 800,000, we didn't know exactly, because we had no idea what the cost structure is going to look like. At this point, this is the best guess estimate. There's additional funding, obviously, and that would be authorized. However, if it's not needed in design, then that would just revert to the core principle of the other 2 million that would come in, plus whatever the cost once we get the bids. But when we collectively sat around the table and trying to figure out how much money should be transferred over to the community foundation, we picked a number out of the air because we had no concept, no planning. It was just a number, but we knew what its purpose was to be, and that was to design this project, not award the construction contract, but design the project. So whatever's left over by the time that we get all through the design process, that would revert to the construction contract. So.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, I don't want to come up short. That would
Well,
slow us down. We don't want that.
We didn't either when we picked the 800,000. That was, and so I think that was simply a number, just like, as you know, when we were working on the sockeye Inn, we didn't know what the number would be. And we finally, fortunately, identified that. But when we started this process back in August, all the numbers were just guesstimates. And so any funds that is not used for the design, as the original CEMAC memorandum said, will convert to the construction.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this goes to the question John just asked, but I just want to put a little bit of a finer point on it. So with the specific appropriation that we have tomorrow, are we paying, is that for work that's already been done or work that will be done in the future? Are we reimbursing ourselves for work that has already been done? I think is part of the question too.
Saxon?
Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, this is really that we would draw from that appropriation for the professional services that you see on page 2 there. We're sitting on these proposals. These are still subject to change. We'll kind of find, as we come up with the design and really dial in the scope of work, we would draw from that professional services $800,000 and do individual task purchase orders for these services. So in the future, we are not compensating any financial commitments.
Okay, but on page 2, if we're looking at the same document, the dates are March 1st, March 2nd. But you're saying it's still all prospective?
Correct. We're holding these proposals. We have not made a commitment as we dial in from the work groups, dial in the need for this structure, and that will reduce the cost for these professional services. So to our benefit, to the public's benefit, we are fine. We are really dialing in these quotes before we give a commitment. And one, because it's subject to approval, and so we're waiting for that before we provide a financial commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, through the chair, I meant to say that those dates, Mr. Dunbar, are that you see there, those are the dates that I received their proposals. I requested them roughly a week and a half prior. And by the time we received them, they're all dated March 1 and 2, give or take, on when we received those proposals.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Before we move on?
I think that concludes our presentation, unless there's questions.
All right, thank you. So that concludes the administration's portion of the presentation. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to our community councils. So we have 2 community council representatives, one from the Campbell Park Community Council and one from the University Area Community Council. So we'll go ahead and start with Campbell Park. Who will be representing Campbell Park for this meeting?
I can represent Campbell Park for this meeting unless someone else from my council is there. This is Andrew Gray.
All right, not hearing anyone else. Go ahead, Mr. Gray.
So I think the concern, so I'm Andrew Gray, I'm the Secretary of Campbell Park Community Council. I think I heard Mr. Trombley say a few minutes ago that this was the People's Project. I've also heard a couple of you referring to this as being, trying to make this as open and transparent as possible. I attended the town hall in June 2021 with Dr. Morris and Mayor-elect Bronson. I attended the town hall in October with Craig Campbell, Dr. Morris, Mr. Weddleton, Ms. Zolotel. People from my community council have been showing up and speaking. We don't feel like we're being listened to. No representative from the mayor's office has come to Campbell Park to talk to us about this project since it started back in June. The people who live closest to the proposed site have not been included. This has not been open and transparent for those of us who live around the area of this site. And we have issued resolutions along with University Area, along with Scenic Foothills, along with other community councils not in the area about our concerns about this project. We testified at assembly meetings, and in the fall, we were told that it was too soon, that the time for public comment would come later. And then when we testified in January, we were told it was too late, that this has already been decided, this has already been moving forward. When I hear Mr. Weddleton talking about what the process would be for making the shelter even bigger than the current plan, that's another concern. For Campbell Park Community Council, we don't feel this has been open and transparent. We don't feel that we've been included. We feel like we're being told what is going to happen to us. And that's all that we have from Campbell Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Who will be the representative from the University Area Community Council? I believe, Mr. Stang, if it's you, you are muted.
Okay, I thought Tyler was going to be here, but Tyler Robinson, who's the current president, I'm the immediate past president. I'll have to agree with what Andrew said. And just let's take today's presentation, for instance. I'm glad that I could tune in and see you all, but the moment Adam started speaking, he was off camera, pointing at a map that was off camera, so we couldn't understand or see anything that he was talking about until he was finished speaking, had said 95% of his words. And then we got the map on camera. And then when you all left the topic of the map and we're talking, you kept the map on camera so we couldn't see you. Well, this is pretty elementary public involvement issues. The most elementary that cover all public involvement issues. Can your audience see you? Can they hear you? Do they understand what you're saying? Anchorage wasn't born yesterday. Neither have these public processes. We got to do better, folks. A lot better. And we don't have to look at our watch every minute to see if it's time to get out of here. You have to listen to the public whether you like to hear it or not. That's my gut reaction. One thing that Andrew said about the various meetings, the same thing applies to any letter that we sent to the mayor or the mayor's office. And every letter or resolution that the UACC sent, we also sent to the mayor and the mayor's office. Never heard a word back, ever, on anything we sent. Not a single word. We had invited the mayor's representative way back, Dr. Morris, to come to a community council meeting way back in July. He came, and I told him we want a presentation and Q&As. He understood that. I can give it to you in writing if you'd like to see it. He came back, he came to the meeting, did his quick presentation, and after one or two questions, he had to leave. It seemed clear to us that his prior openness all of a sudden got closed. We suspect and have no way to know that he was told not to make presentation or not to stay for any length. And we've heard from other community councils that they can't get anybody to come from the mayor's office. If we go back to where we were in July, this project was going to happen. We wanted approval the next month, the mayor's office from the assembly, for a project called a sprung structure that is going to be sole source to people who knew about it. These people were brought, the sole source people, the sprung structure people, were brought into meetings, and the mayor's office tried to get them to get up to speak to people. We had said we are concerned about going sole source projects. No reason for sole source. And then also identifying people ahead of time saying, oh, well, these are the people, you know, we need to talk to them. Thanks for coming back into the picture, Adam. What kind of business is this? This is not how we run business. We were told by the mayor that he's going to be having this program structure up and ready and run in the end of October of 2021. We said that was impossible. We never heard a word back. I think we made a lot of good points in our letter of July 7th, or July 8th, I think it is. Those points, the great majority of them came from public residents of the University Community Council area and other areas nearby. The notion of public participation seems so often to be viewed as a necessary evil to be gotten out of the way as quickly as possible and skipped if at all possible. You guys were talking about, hey, we can avoid a public process. Hey, how can we avoid a public process? Well, if we do it this way, we can avoid a public process. If we do it this way, we can take another shortcut. So are we going to be a year from now doing the same thing, cutting people out right and left? That's the reaction, the kind of emotional reaction that we're getting from everyone in our community council and the other community councils. Do you think that's a good way to allow that to continue without being addressed? Just let it go. Give people no answer or short answers. Is that a good way to run a public process for both the mayor's office? Mr. Adam, you're back out of the picture again, leaning back. And the rest of you, I can't see the people in the foreground. I'm not sure. We sent our information in lots and lots of times. You all have copies. Sure would like some answers. I think that's it for now.
Great, thanks. I appreciate both of the community councils for responding. For other members of the public, just want to let you know this is a public hearing item on the agenda tomorrow. It is item 14E on our agenda. You will have 3 minutes to speak at the public hearing tomorrow, so definitely encourage you to attend and speak to the item we have before us. All right, so then that pretty much concludes our agenda for today. Is there any other discussion folks have? Any responses to the community council comments? Any other thoughts on the presentation today? Now's your time. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I believe the current president of the University Community Council just entered the room, and maybe he would like to have a minute to make a comment if that's possible.
Yeah, I was pretty clear at the beginning that we would have one representative from each community council, and so we have had one representative from each council.
Okay.
But like I stated, there will be public comment tomorrow at the public hearing. Any other comments before I gavel us out?
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Dunbar.
I just want to sort of reiterate, I'm hopeful that the administration can provide these documents and we can get them online, the ones that were sent to us today, but also I think that the RFP process is confusing for a lot of folks, and those initial design documents, I've just found them really hard to find. And I think that those initial design documents should be appended to these other documents when they go forward. And so I guess that's a suggestion, but also a really strong request that is put online at both this work session page, but also the homelessness committee page, if it isn't already, so that people can see kind of the initial design documents.
So I'm gonna ask just for a verbal confirmation from the clerk that we can get those 3 documents up.
Yes,
Okay.
confirmed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. Mr. Dunbar, I have a question for clarification for you. So what you're referring to is attachment, I believe, to the RFP, which had a conceptual design. Is that what you're requesting to be attached to the document that I put forward titled Navigation Center?
I believe so. You know, I was looking for it before this meeting and I couldn't find it easily. But yeah, I think any conceptual design products that have been you know, used to get us to this point and are going to be referenced going forward, I think that's the only one. But if you feel free to correct me. If there are other design documents that exist, I'd love for those to be shared to the public too. I think that's the only one though.
That's correct. That is the only one. And it is still online under our RFP section under purchasing opportunities. So, but we can attach it to this. I do want to stress that it is a concept, and based on conversations that we have with the design team and the contractor, it may not be very valid. It is strictly a concept. To help you kind of visualize this, if you go to a contractor and you say, I want to build a house on this lot, they need an idea of a house. So this was purely just a concept.
No, I appreciate that, but I think with members of the public, it's useful to understand even that kind of concept. I mean, it's the only sort of real drawing we've gotten since, I mean, I guess there were some initial graphics that were done back in this past summer, but that is the closest we have to something that the public can really wrap their mind around. So I'm fine with it having caveats on it to stress that it's, you know, in conceptual form, but I just really think it's, and like, for example, putting it on the procurement part of our website, that's not one that's generally visited by the public, you know, in the same way that homelessness is.
Well, that's disappointing to hear. I'd like to see more people visiting my website. But understood, Mr. Dunbar. We'll provide that to the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. All right,
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity.
All right.
It's important.
Thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and give us 30 minutes back, and we will see everyone at the regular assembly meeting tomorrow. We're adjourned.
Practice. All right. Terrible, terrible.